Test 1, 2, 1, 2. Test 1, 2, 1, 2. Test 1, 2, 3.
Interpreters, can you please do a sound check on the English channel?
And this is the English channel. Sound check. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1. Sound check, 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 sound check. This is the English channel for today. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Sound check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Sound check, 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 sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 1, 2. Sound check, check, check. 1, 2. Tell me when you want me to go onto the French side, please. 1, 2, 1, 2. Sound check, 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 sound check. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
Interpreters,
9.
can you do a sound check on the French channel?
Sound checks are good. Thank you very much, Global AV team.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin our meeting in 1 minute. So I was going to say take your seats, but everyone is seated, but we will begin in 1 minute. Okay, it is 9:30 and I would like to call our meeting to order. This is the 15th meeting of this term of office of the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee, and I welcome everyone to our meeting this morning, our budget meeting for 2025. I would like to begin with a roll call, please.
Councillor Bradley,
Here.
Councillor Desroches.
Here.
Councillor Dudas. Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Hubley. Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor Luloff.
Present.
Conseiller Plante.
Ici.
Vice Chair Hill.
Present.
You have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Excellent, thank you. The city of Ottawa is located on the unceded, never surrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe First Nations people. They have been inhabitants and stewards of these lands for millennia, and we honor and we recognize them. Okay, our agenda today, as I said, is focused on the budget, and I would first like to call if there are any declarations of interest. Does any member have a declaration to present the committee? Councillor Luloff, do you have an item?
I do, Chair. But just a moment. I'll read my declaration of interest in a moment if it's okay, Chair. If we can come back to it.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you with the audio in the room. Do you have a declaration? I do believe you have a declaration.
I do, Mr. Chair. If we can come back to it in a moment, once we get closer to the item, I'd appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, we will have to make the declaration before we get into the budget, so we'll come back to you in a second. Item 3 on our agenda is the confirmation of minutes from our meeting that was held on the 17th of October, 2024. Are these meetings, are the minutes of the meeting confirmed? Confirmed. Good. Thank you. So before we get to the staff presentation on the budget, we do have a technical motion by the Vice Chair to add the budget documents to our agenda. And I'd like to turn to the Vice Chair at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whereas the 2025 draft operating and capital budget documents for the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee were circulated and published after being tabled at Council on November 13th, 2024, which was after the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee agenda publication date. Therefore, be it resolved that pursuant to subsection 89(3) of the procedure bylaw, the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee approve that the budget documents be added to the agenda of Tuesday, 21st November, 2024.
Committee members, is that approved? Approved. Thank you, Vice. Okay, well, I do want to now turn to the staff presentation on the budget, but I do think it would be in order for the declaration from Councillor Luloff to be read now if we're ready to go.
Yes, thank you. I, Councillor Matthew Luloff, declare a potential deemed pecuniary interest on the following portions of the 2025 Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee draft operating budget. Emergency Protective Services, Fire Services Operating Resource Requirement Communications, page 7 of the EPPS budget book, as my spouse is employed by Versaterm Public Safety, a software firm that provides services to Ottawa Fire Service and would receive funding from or would potentially receive funding from this budget line items. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Luoff, for that declaration. Are there any other declarations of interest on this matter? Okay, thank you. So we will have the staff presentation on the 2025 budget. I will then ask the vice chair to read the roadmap motion for us at that time. Following the roadmap motion, we will receive 3 public delegations speaking to the budget. I will draw committee members' attention that we have received as well written correspondence on this matter, which is in the shared directory. And then following our public delegations, we'll entertain questions from committee members on the budget. So at this time, I would like to welcome, there's a full slate, the full team in front of us today, but City Treasurer Rogers and our GM Perot who are here. Perot to start off with introductions, and then we'll, like I said, go in the order that describes. So who would like to start first?
There we go. Thank you, Chair Brockington, and good morning, members of committee. Today, we will be presenting the draft 2025 budget for the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee. Nous présentons aujourd'hui le budget provisoire de 2025.
Today, we want to present you with the draft budget of the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Service Committee.
Leadership team for Emergency Protective Services. Je suis accompagné par mes collègues.
I have my colleagues, Mr. Chapman, Director of Bylaws and
Manager of the Business and Technical Support Services and Public Policy Development Team, Chief Paul Hutt of Ottawa Fire Services, Chief Pierre Poirier of the Ottawa Paramedic Service, and Beth Gooding, Director of Public Safety Service. We are all available to answer any questions committee members may have on the 2025 operating and capital budgets for Emergency and Protective Services. The budget meets the direction set by Council of a 2.9% property tax increase while making strategic investments in key priority areas across the department's service areas. These proposed investments will help to address growth in our city and ensure that we continue to provide the services residents rely on every day, while ensuring that our equipment and infrastructure is climate resilient and emergency response ready. La Direction Générale investit pour s'assurer que nous
General Office wants to make sure that we will be able to provide the services that residents expect. We want to make sure that our equipment as well as our infrastructure are resilient to climate change events.
What's before you today also support what we heard from the public as part of the pre-budget engagement process, where public safety was identified as one of the top priorities, which includes the delivery of paramedic and fire services. Staff have also ensured that the investments proposed align and support key long-term plans and strategies, such as the city's strategic plan and term of council priorities, as well as efficiencies identified as part of the corporate service review program and other continuous improvement initiatives. I will now turn the presentation over to the General Manager of Finance and Corporate Services and Chief Financial Officer, Cyril Rogers. Over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I can say that this is probably the first time where you'll see as many chiefs at the table. So I'm happy to be here this morning with my chief colleagues to present the budget. We can go into the next slide, please. So as you'll see before you today, it's pretty much we've been sticking with the consistent agenda for those that have been at committees throughout the week. We'll go a little bit of an overview in terms of the operating budget, capital budget, how that's funded, and then we'll pass it over to each respective colleague, and they'll go through some of the highlights in terms of the key things that we want to identify in this budget. Again, it's a very detailed budget document. So the goal today is really to highlight the key investments that we feel is a priority for this committee and for those that are listening or in behind us and partaking in the budget process. So next slide, please. So this budget is just over $400 million from a gross operating budget perspective. We do have recoveries and allocations. These are mainly from, we recover a lot of our corporate radio. So the corporate radio budget is held in this department, but then we recover those costs across other areas that use the corporate radio program. In this one as well, the other main component of recoveries is we recover costs back from the ASE program. So the ASE revenue is kind of housed in a different budget in the transportation. For those services that support that program, we recover costs back to that program. Then on the revenue side, two main components on the revenue side. These is mainly in paramedics. So this is the provincial revenue that we get from the funding for the paramedic program. And then the other component of the revenue in this budget is really related to Rogers area and bylaw for the enforcement fees and that we have coming in there from parking and the other different user fees within bylaw. That brings that down to a net requirement of $272 million for this overall budget. The budget on the capital side is at 18 million, 17.9 million. Again, highlights here is how we allocate those that are contributing to the overall climate change. So as you heard me before in previous committees, this is our second budget cycle where we added the element of climate change to our budget documents. On the capital side of the budget, if you go through all the projects, you'll see two categories in the templates where we talk about climate resiliency and GHG. And we label that with low, medium, high impact. And that's how we kind of define the contributions of all the capital projects to climate change. And this is what it equates to in this budget, just over $6 million of the total $18 million budget. Next slide, please. From a service area perspective. Good. From a service area perspective, this is out of budget, again, is allocated down across the different service areas. Again, repetitive, but the $122 million, that's predominantly in paramedics and bylaw. And that's just basically the breakdown of the operating budget for those service areas. Next slide, please. On the capital side, the majority of the capital, again, in this budget, in this committee, is related to equipment, mainly equipment. There is some vehicles there as well. Obviously, on the paramedic, fire, the different services in this budget, there is significant investments that we do in the equipment from an equipment perspective. There is a $1.7 million budget increase this year for some retrofit at Rogers headquarter location on Industrial Avenue. So that you'll see that there. On the funding side, or next slide, please. On the funding side, this is how the capital program is funded. Again, mainly through reserves. There's a couple of items in the project, in the capital program that's eligible for DCs. There's a small little component there for revenue. You see just around 500K or so. That's two grants in the fire services, the USAR, I think, in the CBRN. There's small programs there that we have some grant funding that we received there. So that's what the revenue for that's related to. I'll now pass it over to Ryan, I believe, or who's next? You can go to the next slide.
Thank you, Cyril. Good morning, everyone. Right slide. Aligning with the priority, a city that has affordable housing and is more livable for all, bylaw and regulatory services has two key initiatives in the 2025 draft budget. The service will invest $1.3 million towards 10 FTEs to address increased call volumes, improve response times, and support business licensing and property standards enforcement. There's also $528,000 for the replacement of communication, technology, and safety equipment, which will help ensure staff working in the field will have the tools they need to do their job effectively and safely. These investments, which will partially be offset through revenues, allows the service to meet the growing demand and continue to provide the reliable service our residents expect. Aligning with the priority, a city that is green and resilient, the operating budget includes $115,000 and the capital budget includes $475,000 towards the purchase of hybrid and electric vehicles and equipment to support the new programs and the increasing service demands. This will contribute to reducing greenhouse emissions from bylaw and regulatory services fleet. Aligning with the priority, a city that is more connected with reliable, safe, and accessible mobility options, the service will invest $330,000 for one-time costs related to the implementation of the new administrative penalty system. This cost will be recovered through program revenues. This new model reduces the city's overall ticket processing costs and helps promote road safety initiatives. Next slide, please. Bylaw and Regulatory Services has ongoing efficiency initiatives which aim to enhance client service and providing better value to residents. As previously reported to Council, Bylaw and Regulatory Services has seen an upward trend of service requests for at least a decade and has taken on many new licensing and enforcement regimes over the past several years. Staffing investment in Budget 2025 and in recent years, as well as implementation of new tools and technology, help alleviate the pressure that these requests increase place on staff and reduce the amount of time residents have to wait for resolution. Bylaw and Regulatory Services began operating the new automated speed enforcement center in 2024. This program is scalable to meet the volume of infractions and allows for a greater investment to implement road safety measures. The on-demand accessible taxi dispatch pilot was also launched in 2024, began with the goal to provide the opportunity to evaluate the efficacy of a dedicated centralized dispatch for accessible taxis. Thank you. I'll now turn the presentation over to Chief Hutt.
Thank you, Director Chapman. Aligning with the priority, a city that has affordable housing and is more livable for all, Ottawa Fire Service has several investments. The service will invest $2.3 million towards the conversion of Fire Station 81 in Stittsville from fully volunteer to composite, mostly for the addition of 22 FTEs required to meet urban response standards. This funding is prorated based on projected conversion of the station in mid-2025. This investment will help address growth and improve response times in the communities of Stittsville and Richmond. There is $380,000 for resources for the enforcement administration of the new false fire alarm fees aimed to ensure resources are available for true emergencies. This investment, offset by revenues, is for 2 FTEs approved by Council in 2024 as part of the false fire alarm strategy. The Ottawa Fire Service would also invest $180,000 in 1 FTE to make a permanent and dedicated resource for mental health needs for the Ottawa Fire Service staff. The service has recently appointed a staff psychologist to ensure staff get appropriate care aimed at prevention and to address personal needs of members. When mental health needs are addressed, staff can perform their duties more effectively, efficiently, and better serve the community. Under the priority, a city that is green and resilient, the Ottawa Fire Service is making investments in increasing the resiliency of the service and reducing emissions. Budget 2025 includes $750,000 for renewal of replacement tools and equipment necessary to ensure effective day-to-day operations, which includes the transition from gas-powered to battery-powered where feasible as part of life cycling. Next slide, please. Ottawa Fire Service has several initiatives moving forward in line with the city's review service efficiency goals. Ottawa Fire Service Life Cycle program provides fire services with equipment in both current and reliable, which reduces the possibility of failure during emergencies. This allows for continued reliable emergency response while providing due consideration for the safety and staff of residents, as well as protecting property. The service has maintained its accreditation with the Commission on Fire Accreditation International as well. As part of this process, staff reviews performance standards. The service has identified areas of improvements and ensure the effective and efficient responses. Station alerting and paging project aims to enhance dispatchability through the implementation of new technology. The station alerting system is used for urban stations to notify staff when there's an emergency, and the paging system is primarily used for the volunteer sector of our service. Upgrades to these systems are necessary to ensure effective and timely responses for firefighters during emergency calls. Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Chief Poirier.
Bon matin. J'ai l'honneur de vous présenter le
It's an honor for me to present you the main topics.
Budget for the paramedic service. Next slide, please. Important additions to our staff are 23 new FTEs to address response volumes and improve response times. Response times is one of the council priorities that we're focused in on, and the new FTEs will definitely be an improvement for our service. We also have $600,000 for 2 vehicles, which will support those paramedics on the road, once again, to improve our response times to the community. We also have 4 new staff that'll be working in the logistics area. That goes back to the pandemic and the changes in deep cleaning vehicle preparation procedures as a result of the pandemic. And we're happy to have 4 new staff there. And then we have another over $3 million for the renewal and the replacement of emergency medical equipment. Of particular note are defibrillators that we have and we also provide in the community. Next slide, please. There's a number of items that have and changes in the service to our community. Of note was in April of this year was the medical priority dispatch system, which is a change in the algorithm at dispatch. It was a request going back over 20 years that was implemented on April 11th of this year. And we've seen significant improvement in our service to our community, to which we'll be reporting with our annual report. Also from a couple of years ago is the our investment plan. And we hired all of the staff that were required last year, and we're happy to have the 23 staff in the budget again this year, once again to improve response times to our community. Over the last couple of years, we've made application to the Ministry of Health for patient models of care, which are changes in clinical practice or permission to change clinical practice with the intent twofold. One is to provide better community or care in the community, but also to reduce the number of patients we take to the hospital. And those have been effective, and we continue to develop those programs and implement new ones. And a couple of other important pieces are recently we implemented the Byward Market pilot project because overdoses in the Byward Market has resulted in the death of individuals, and the paramedic community has thought that we can do better. Recently, you've seen results of that where we've been able to actually provide care on site with the added benefit of reducing the number of times that we actually have to have a paramedic ambulance respond or actually take that individual to the hospital. So very much a very positive project. And then the last one is the mental well-being response team. That's been a couple of years, but continues to provide results in our community because once again, often those individuals who are calling 911 with a mental health event or a crisis don't always need to go to the hospital. And by combining a paramedic with a social worker, we've been able to defer a lot of those patients to other social or healthcare services in our community. Thank you very much. On next to Director Beth Gooding.
Thanks, Chief Poirier. So the Public Safety Service 2025 budget includes investments in line with the priority, a city that has affordable housing and is more livable for all. The service will invest $115,000 for one new security advisor and $400,000 for renewal and life cycle replacement of corporate security equipment. As reported in the Public Safety Service annual report, security incidents at city facilities continue to rise, and these investments will contribute to a more safe and secure environment for staff, residents, and visitors. Le budget provisoire de 2025
The 2025 draft budget will also have an investment of $2.6 million for the extension of the corporate radio contract, which will include an upgrade to the corporate radio network.
This investment will help ensure the city continues to have a reliable public safety grade radio service available for first responders and frontline users. Aligning with the priority, a city that is green and resilient, the Public Safety Service will invest $100,000 towards renewal and life cycle replacement equipment for the city's Emergency Operations Center to continue to maintain operational readiness for emergency response. Ces investissements garantissent que le personnel
These
du service de
investments
sécurité
will make
publique
sure that the personnel
dispose
from
d'un équipement
emergency
moderne,
preparedness have modern
fiable,
equipment
ce qui nous permet
when
d'assurer
needed.
des opérations
Then we will be
quotidiennes
able
soutenues
to
et
intervene
efficaces.
every day.
The public safety, next slide, please. The Public Safety Service has several initiatives moving forward with the goal of finding efficiency and enhancing service. Staff have been identifying any efficiencies or enhancements that should be put in place prior to the transition of Next Generation 911. And recently, the Office of Emergency Management obtained formal accreditation under ICS Canada. The Incident Command System is a pan-Canadian command and control system used to manage emergencies and planned events. L'accréditation permet à la ville de mener
This will
ses
allow the
propres
city of Ottawa
opérations et
to improve its training and improve the interoperability with other administration and jurisdiction.
has also been focused on increasing community level of preparedness and climate resiliency. Building community resiliency involves working at the local level to make sure that communities have the capacities, knowledge, and plans they need to help each other, which is also an important aspect of the city's climate resiliency strategy. So with that, I'll thank you and pass things over to Manager Bietlo.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. The Public Policy Development Service will be focusing on the work and the bylaw reviews in the bylaw review work plan approved by council for this term, in addition to the feasibility assessments directed earlier this year by council. To that end, Budget 2025 includes one FTE to support and deliver these projects and other public policy development needs. One of the key themes of this work plan is the comprehensive review of the city's business licensing bylaw, which is in line with council's priority of ensuring a city with a diversified and prosperous economy. Substantive reviews of several business licensing categories are being conducted throughout this term, with accompanying staff reports rising to this committee at regular intervals, including the ones already approved this year for snowplow contractor licensing and a new licensing regime for vape product retailers. We will then bring forward a new, updated, and comprehensive business licensing bylaw at the end of this term in 2026 for this committee and council consideration. Our overall work on the business licensing bylaw will focus on modernizing existing regulations and requirements and seeking opportunities to leverage technology and reduce red tape while still ensuring council priorities of public health and safety, consumer protection, and nuisance abatement. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Emergency and Protective Services also has a business and technical support branch called BTSS for short, which provides strategic and operational support for key business functions across all the services in this department. Our BTSS also includes Event Central. Event Central is the first point of contact for organizers of outdoor events of all sizes, as well as film projects, and it administers the special events on public and private property bylaw, as well as the film bylaw. Event Central staff wear many hats. This team leads the integrated event and film planning, reconciles input from all impacted stakeholders, and ensures event organizers and city services are coordinated in a way that contributes positively to these events and film projects and their safe execution. Budget 2025 includes one FTE required to address the growing complexity and size of events in the city, as well as film projects that we are seeing being sent our way from Ottawa Tourism. This investment aligns with several council priorities, including a city that is more livable for all and a city with a diversified and prosperous economy. The work of Event Central ensures that residents have access to cultural and recreational events and promotes Ottawa as a place to be for visitors. The BTSS in this department also provides program and project support for key initiatives in the service areas that aim to improve service and efficiency, such as the implementation of tools and technology, various modernization projects, as well as resident outreach and education. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Well, thank you to our staff for the overview of the department's proposed budget for 2025. It is appreciated. I do want to thank you for listening and reading significant amount of feedback, not just from councillors in our budget consultations, but from the public as well. I think that there's been some constructive suggestions over the last year, and I think that is largely reflected in the budget that we have. So thank you for all your work to getting us to this point. I sincerely appreciate that. We'll have the roadmap motion introduced now by the vice chair, and then we will welcome delegations. So, Councillor, if you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Que le comité de services de protection et de préparation aux situations d'urgence recommande au Conseil réuni en comité plénier d'approuver son budget préliminaire de fonctionnement et de mobilisation
To
de
approve
2025
the
comme suit.
Emergency Preparedness and Protective Service Committee 2025 draft as follow: Emergency Protective Service Department, General Manager's Office and Business Support Services, Operating Resource Requirement, page 2. Public Safety Service as follow: User fees, page 5. Operating Resource Requirement, page 4. Ottawa Fire Services as follow: User fees, page 8 to 11. Operating Resource Requirement, page 7 as followed: Communication and remaining service operating resources. Then Ottawa Paramedic Service as follow: User fees, page 14. Operation Resources Requirement, page 13. Bylaw Regulation Services as follows: User fees, page 17 to 25. Operating Resource Requirement, page 16. Public Policy Development, Operating Resource Requirement, page 27. Emergency Preparedness and Protective Service Committee Capital Budget, page 28, 29. Individual project listed on pages 48 to 73.
Mr. Chair.
Monsieur le
Thank you, Vice
Président,
Chair.
merci
That's the
beaucoup.
roadmap motion, which we'll vote on
Alors,
at the
c'était
end.
notre motion de
This time,
feuille de
I'll
route.
call
Nous
if
allons
there are
y
any
revenir.
motions from members
J'aimerais
of the
savoir, y
committee.
a-t-il d'autres
It's
motions
not
de la part des membres
mandatory
du
to put them
comité?
forward now, but certainly best to put them ahead of
C'est mieux
public
de le...
delegations.
Si vous en
Seeing
avez,
none, okay,
il n'y
so
en a
we'll now
pas.
proceed with public
Passons
delegations.
maintenant
We do
aux
have
délégations
3
publiques.
who have registered for a meeting today. First delegation will be Jan Scora and Shirley Patton from the Ambleside Healthcare Collaborative. They'll be followed by Dave Andre from the Ottawa Fires Association, and then we'll have Cheryl Parrott. So just welcome the group from Ambleside, if you're present. The delegations will sit here on the corner, so please come up, and if we need some extra chairs, we'll bring some extra chairs up as well. So good morning to you both. Welcome. You do have 5 minutes. At the 1 minute remaining mark, I will say 1 minute. And then when we get to 0, I'll intervene, but welcome today. And like I said, you have 5 minutes for your delegation.
Thank you very much, Chair and committee members. My name is Jan Scora, and with me is Shirley Payton. We're members of a volunteer older adult community on Ambleside Drive that's working to help seniors to age at home. We're part of an OASIS program. We're also very concerned. In fact, we're angry and afraid about healthcare for seniors, and we're trying to make a difference. We've been working with the OPS community paramedics to run wellness clinics in our community under the fine leadership of Claire Harton and our partners at Pinecrest Queensway Community Health Centre, Ottawa Public Health, and Rexall Pharmacy. What is a wellness clinic, you ask? It's a multidisciplinary team of primary care providers, includes paramedics, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, pharmacists, and system navigators who come together to provide services to older adults and who have questions about their health. They may not be feeling well, they may not have doctors, or they can't get to a doctor. These clinics deal with health problems which, left untreated, can lead to 911 calls. Councillors Kavanagh, Hubley, and Lowe are familiar with these clinics as they visited them over this summer. We've seen the impact of wellness clinics in our community and think it is high time to bring their benefits to other parts of the city. We believe there are 4 reasons why wellness clinics are important to the city. Number 1, 911 services and hospital ERs are jammed. Number 2, older adults represent a large proportion of ambulance deliveries to hospitals. Let's not forget 20% of older adults do not have doctors. Number three, the city needs ways to treat the most vulnerable and reduce the number of calls to 911. And lastly, we have seen how wellness clinics in our communities at relatively low cost provide timely healthcare access, especially to those that don't have primary care providers, who are more likely to be transported by ambulance to overcrowded emergency departments of hospitals. We're here for a call to action for the city over the coming years. Firstly, we support expansion of the OPS community paramedic service. We applaud the additional funding proposed for OPS in the 2025 budget. However, the city should also be interested in investing in complementary preventative care options in our community. And secondly, we support the establishment of wellness clinics in public city facilities, such as the one that's just been run at the Carlingwood Public Library yesterday and over the next few months, to reduce the burden on 911 services and help seniors age in place. Shirley would like to tell you her story about the OPS Wellness Clinic and how it had a profound impact on her life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to tell what I'm going to call a life-saving experience with the community paramedics and the Ambleside Wellness Clinic. My family doctor retired in the spring, like so many, and there was no replacement. In late June and early July, I had 2 episodes of heavy sweating and dizziness that put me out of commission for a few hours. I didn't think they were serious enough to go to emergency, and I certainly didn't want to wait 18 hours trying to get to see somebody. Nevertheless, because of the wellness clinics that were happening at Ambleside, I registered for the July wellness clinic because I wanted to get the take of some healthcare professional on what had actually happened. I told my story to a paramedic who reacted very quickly to what I had described, took my vital signs, and got me to see the wellness clinic doctor immediately. The doctor listened to my story. She immediately had the paramedics come in and do an urgent ECG. She sent me for urgent cardiac tests. And as I didn't have a family doctor, she said she would follow me through the monthly wellness clinics. I did attend the April clinic. I'd had no recurrences of my symptoms. I've had done a few of the cardiac tests, but the paramedics stressed that should I have these incidents again, I should call 911 and go to the emergency as quickly as I could. The doctor was agreeing to continue to follow me. A couple of days later, I collapsed in the condo hallway, and following what the community paramedics had said, I was seen in emergency. I wouldn't have known how serious things were without access to that wellness clinic, and subsequently to the OPS at home management program. If the wellness clinic and the paramedics and the doctors had not been available to me, I really don't know if I'd be sitting here today. So thank you.
Thank you both for your presentation this morning. Thank you. Before you go, we do have a question from Councillor Kavanaugh. Councillor.
Thank you both for coming out today and telling us your story and just describing the wellness clinic. How many people came out to the clinic and how quickly were they seen?
Thanks very much for the question. The clinics ran for 3 hours for once a month. About 30 residents in our buildings and in the area were seen. Generally, there was, each resident was given a time. They waited maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then they had 15 to 20 minutes with a paramedic, a nurse, a doctor, what was necessary. So it provided an incredible, benefit for people in the community. And as well, we found that the paramedics found that there were a number of people that were more vulnerable in the community, and they added them to their community a support list, such as Shirley had just mentioned. And we believe that that's an important part of trying to reduce the number of 911 calls because, you know, honestly, we see yes, ambulances and paramedics almost on a daily basis in our relatively congested I guess buildings where, you know, and so this is a problem. We know it's a problem. And we believe that wellness clinics and the work that the community paramedics is doing will reduce that problem and improve the wait times and reduce costs of these services.
Thank you. It's rare that when we do budget that we hear of success stories that for a very small amount of funding, we were able to help so many people. And this is a pilot project through the NARC program, which is a naturally occurring retirement community. But of course, there's other communities out there, including Ottawa Community Housing Buildings that have run wellness clinics. And it's been a huge success because of the shortage of family doctors. This has been a fantastic way for the city to fill in a gap that will help people from and prevent people from going to the emergency like Shirley and know to do something ahead of time. I really appreciate this. I'll be asking questions to staff about this, and it's important to have the stats on this so we can see the success and hopefully make good use. I want to give a special thanks to Claire, who's been excellent in the paramedics and Pinecrest Queensway. What a great partnership. And I think that's what we're looking at is the success of partnerships. And this is a great way to use our budgets to prevent people from needing those emergency cares. Thank you so much.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you both for your delegation. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave Andre. Mr. Andre, welcome as well to you. No stranger to this committee. 5 minutes. I'll give you a warning at the 1 minute mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Good morning. My name is David Andre. I am the president of the Ottawa Professional Firefighters Association and proudly represent the 979 members who are full-time firefighters with Ottawa Fire Services. Bonjour, je m'appelle David André et je suis le président de l'Association des pompiers professionnels d'Ottawa et je représente fièrement les 979 membres à temps plein de service des incendies d'Ottawa. While the word fire is in the title, we proudly provide much more than fire services to the residents of Ottawa. We attend medical incidents, automobile accidents, industrial accidents, water rescues, high-angle rescues, confined space rescues, hazmat calls, collapse rescues, and trench rescues. We're in all hazard response. Just as important are the other Ottawa Fire Services divisions that make this a world-class fire department, but don't always get the recognition they deserve. They are communications, air management, training, safety, maintenance, and fire prevention. We showed up at this very meeting last year advocating for psychologists. I am proud to report that Ottawa Fire Services now employs a full-time psychologist. Every member of this committee deserves to be thanked for making this a reality. One member went above and beyond and led the charge to get a full-time psychologist for Ottawa Fire Services. That committee member is Vice Chair, Councillor David Hill. Councillor, we appreciate your advocacy for first responders, but more importantly, the advocacy for their mental health. We would also like to thank Chief Paul Hutt and his fire services management team for this major improvement and many other improvements we have achieved over the last year. We thank this council and previous councils for the work done to get the new Canada North station built. Our members began staffing this new fire station in 2024 with the industry standard of 4 firefighters on a pump. We are pleased to see money in the 2025 budget to convert Stittsville to a composite fire station. The population growth and density in Stittsville support this decision to have career firefighters stationed there. The OPFA is conscious of the current budget pressures, but we would like this committee to consider the following concerns we have. Ottawa Fire Services added 2 additional FTEs in the training division last year, and 2 in fire prevention. We hope to work collaboratively with fire management to increase staffing in our communications and maintenance divisions as well. Our maintenance division and radio depot, which provides all equipment and repairs, as well as the distribution and cleaning of personal protective equipment and so much more, has the same amount of FTEs as when the City of Ottawa amalgamated back in 2001. The problem is, since that time, all Ottawa Fire Services suppression members now have 2 sets of bunker gear. If you count the career firefighters and the paid on-call firefighters, that is roughly an additional 1,400 sets of gear to take care of. Dirty bunker gear, which was once considered a badge of honor, is no longer acceptable. The task of ordering, maintaining, laundering, and tracking bunker gear is a full-time job on its own. We would also like to work with the Fire Service Management Team and City Council to purchase PFAS-free bunker gear and station wear. Yes, the very same gear and uniforms we wear to protect us in fires is killing our members. It's contributing to high rates of cancer among firefighters. Firefighters have a 9% greater chance of being diagnosed with cancer and a 14% greater chance of dying of cancer than the general population. A Radio Canada investigative TV show tested station uniforms from l'Association des Pompiers de Montréal. They found very high levels of PFAS in their station uniforms. Guess what? Our uniforms are purchased from the exact same supplier. While we have worked with the Fire Services Management Team and the uniform provider to eliminate PFAS from our new uniform items, more needs to be done to ensure all future bunker gear and uniforms are PFAS-free. Vancouver Fire Rescue Services has just purchased 400 and some sets of PFAS-free bunker gear for their members. We would like to see the same in Ottawa over the next few years.
1 minute.
As firefighters, it's a privilege to serve the people of this great city. These additional resources for our growing city will help us better serve your constituents. On behalf of the Ottawa Professional Firefighters Association, who serve this community with both pride and professionalism, I would like to thank you for your time and taking into consideration the concerns we have. Since I have some time left, I'm going to thank the paramedics for their program in the Byward Market. We have seen tremendous improvements in the call volume and also dealing with patients as they get to them long before the public who walk by call 911 for somebody who's sleeping. That program has been excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, President Andre, for your delegation this morning and your strong advocacy on behalf of your members and your kind comments as well this morning. We'll start with questions, and I believe Councillor Luloff is first. Councillor Luloff.
Thanks so much, and super glad to hear about the incredible progress being made on mental health for your members. And again, thanks, David Hill, for taking that on and pushing that. Can you talk a little bit more about PFAS? I know that PFAS is used in firefighting foams and that sort of thing as well. This is actually a substance that's being used as part of your uniform, or is this a substance that sticks to the uniform and stays on the uniform?
So it's a substance that appears in almost everything at this time that is water repellent. Many of the manufacturers are working to eliminate it, and some do have options. Our new quarter zip sweaters do not have PFAS in them anymore. Our new golf shirts do not have PFAS in them anymore. However, the pants we wear still do. My understanding is 511 is working on a water repellent pant that will no longer have PFAS. PFAS is admittedly in many products we see these days. The problem for firefighters is most people don't enter an environment where the temperature is elevated and heating that garment, which will lead to more seeping of the PFAS into the body.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And you are aware of manufacturers that are making proper firefighting equipment that does not contain PFAS?
Correct. So it's very new. 2024 is the first year we've had Canadian fire departments purchase PFAS-free gear, Vancouver being the first. We do have some in Ontario now who have PFAS-free gear. Again, we have to admit that there are smaller departments and the cost is obviously a lot less with less members. But, you know, a good first start for us would be that going forward that we look at purchasing PFAS-free gear as any gear that gets replaced.
That makes a lot of sense. Is there a major cost difference between PFAS-free gear and the gear that's traditionally bought by the Ottawa Fire Service?
I'm not 100% sure, so I will leave that question for the chief if he knows.
That's cool.
If he doesn't, I don't believe it's a big difference, though, but there is a bit of an increase.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks so much. It's always great when I get to learn something. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for the great work that you do, both as a firefighter and on behalf of your membership.
You're welcome, and thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Councillor Luloff. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, President Andre.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our final delegate this morning is Cheryl Parrott.
Good morning, and can you bring up the slides, please? And I'll start talking. So, Chair Brockington and members of committee, it's great to be here. The Hindenburg Community Association is really pleased to see the proposal for 10 new bylaw officers in the new budget. And we hope you will support this. And please consider requesting that some of these new resources go to short-term rentals. Investigations, and consider also a random audit to ensure what's been implemented with the vacant unit tax to ensure that only primary residences are being used and that there's a clear understanding of what this term means, because we believe people misinterpret primary residence. So I have a number of slides that I'll go through that show some of the buildings with short-term rentals here. The majority are new buildings, some small, some big. And we suspect that many of these are not primary residences that are being rented out. Next slide. We know there are false declarations about primary residence. There are misinterpretations of the bylaw, and there are rentals by offshore companies, especially in multi-unit buildings, that are not keeping to the 30-day minimum. And there's other booking platforms being used that are not currently monitored by the city. Next slide. BC recently changed some regulations, and they define short-term rentals as anything less than 90 days. They have some other changes, I believe, too, but the media reports have said that the new regulations have resulted in a decrease in the average rental costs in Vancouver by about $150 a month, as well as returning many units to the rental market. This summer, we did a case study, and we now see just how lucrative short-term rentals are and how labor-intensive bylaw investigations are for these issues. So one property was largely vacant from January to May. It has been almost continuously booked as a short-term rental since May at $170 to $240 per night. So we estimate an income of over $20,000 in 5 months. So this same one-bedroom apartment could probably have rented for about maybe $2,000 a month at the most. So that would equal $10,000. So this is a doubling. And so the math really shows the incentive to go short-term rental. There were lots of bylaw visits to try to connect with the owner and deal with complaints. Next slide. So it's an enormous cost and resources to monitor properties suspected of false declarations and those with issues. A number of the brand new buildings in our area, which range from 4 units to 134 units, have been and are engaged in short-term rentals. Some with just a few units in the building to one that had almost the entire building as short-term rental. It's very doubtful that a new tenant in a new building is renting out their unit as short-term rental, especially when it's most of the building. We also overheard a real estate agent suggesting creating a false lease and then renting the unit out as short-term rental. Next slide. There's lots of garbage issues as well that come along with this. So there's lots more garbage when you've got takeout and Uber, and often little recycling happening. So in 134 unit building that has very small furnished apartments, from observation and conversations, we know that some of these units are being rented out as short-term rental and not by the tenant. The building is now functioning more like a hotel than an apartment, resulting in huge garbage issues for neighbors, and these bins sit out for several days at a time, if not all the time. And this garbage issue again falls to bylaw, just adding to their plate. Next slide.
1 minute.
Please consider changes to the short-term rental bylaw to increase the minimum length of stay to 89 days, similar to BC, and investigate an audit procedure and more education on the definition of a primary residence. And the audit procedure had an impact in the vacant unit tax, and we think it might here as well. Short-term rentals take permanent housing away from those who need housing, and they keep the rental prices up, as Vancouver has found. So we are in a housing crisis and an affordability crisis, and this could make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your delegation this morning. Questions we'll start off with Councillor Plant.
Hi, thank you so much, Cheryl. Just a comment. I wanted to say it was really lovely working with you on the problematic properties pilot. You were a wealth of information. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Parrott, for your delegation this morning. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to transition now to questions from committee members to staff. If any committee member has questions, now is the time. Councillor Bradley, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to staff for the presentation today. I have a few questions. I'll start with Mr. Chapman's shop. I'm really happy to see that we're adding 10 additional bylaw officers, as I know that's been a pressure for some time. I do have a question about how they're going to be deployed and how they're going to help kind of solve some of the issues that we've seen in our communities. So for example, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong in terms of how we call these calls, but you've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and that it's tier 3 that we are not meeting our current response time. And I believe that makes up 60% of our current calls. So could you explain how these 10 officers are going to be deployed, and will they be addressing those tier 3 calls? And maybe what tier 3 calls encompass?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. So the 10 FTEs will be our thoughts are that we're trying to identify the priority areas, and obviously that's property standards, as well as in the short-term rental enforcement area. So that'll be our priority first with those 10 FTEs. We're still doing some analysis to figure out how many of those resources need to be allocated to those service areas. But certainly that's where we're planning on going with these at this point. As far as the priority 1s, 2s, and 3s, you're correct. It's where we've seen a trend in struggling to meet our priority 3 call volumes over the last few years is in our priority 3, which is a majority of our calls. Slightly over 60% of our calls are in the priority 3 category. And yes, we truly believe that the 10 additional FTs will help to increase response times specifically to those priority 3 calls.
Great, thank you. I look forward to seeing the annual report and how those bylaw officers have been effective at closing that gap. My next question is also for you, Mr. Chapman, and it's on the on-demand accessible taxi pilot project that we had approved back in June of 2023. In the budget, we did receive $1.2 million from PTC's, the Voluntary Contribution for the Accessibility Fund. But what I didn't see reflected in the budget is how that money was spent towards the incentives that we approved as part of that pilot project. So I believe it was $5,000 per accessible plate, up to $2,000 for performance standards, and $15 per trip. And it was supposed to be about $1.5 million in incentives annually. So I didn't see it reflected in the budget or as a pressure, given that we only took in $1.2 million. And I'm just wondering if you can explain how much we've spent to date on that incentive program.
Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question, Councillor. The reason why you're not seeing the expenditures yet in the budget is that the incentive program is set up to refund those costs or provide those incentives at the end of the completion of 1 year. So again, there are some provisions that they have to meet. So many rides, so many hours, that type of stuff. So we have to do that analysis at the end of the year, and anybody who's met those requirements will receive their incentives, the money that you're talking about for the vehicles and for the drivers and operators.
So when would be 1 full year of the pilot project?
So we launched mid-April of this year, so it'll be April of 2025. We'll do that review.
And are you concerned that we only took in $1.2 million from PTCs this year, and yet we expect a $1.5 million expense for those incentives?
Mr. Chair, no, Councillor, we're not concerned about meeting those objectives. Those, again, we've seen a huge increase in PTC revenue, so we've seen an increase in rides in 2024. So we're seeing that PTC revenues are back to where they were prior to the pandemic. So that's encouraging. So we're anticipating higher revenues in 2025 related to PTCs.
Do you have the balance of the accessibility fund off the top of your head?
Mr. Chair, sorry, I didn't get the question.
Do you know the balance of the accessibility fund currently off the top of your head?
Unfortunately, I don't have, I can get that to you as quickly as possible. Sorry.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chapman. My next question is for Director Gooding, and it's on the 911 call taker contract that we currently have with Ottawa Police Service. And I understand that it's up for renewal and that there is a pressure in the budget for that contract. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us if you ever review that contract for value for money and if you ever consider other providers other than Ottawa Police Service for that contract.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's a really important discussion. The short answer is that in the immediate term, we have no plans to change the service provider, which is the Ottawa Police Service. But you're correct in saying that this is the subject of a formal service review that we're undertaking as part of the city's broader service review initiative. We're analyzing the data, looking at all aspects, including value for money, and we anticipate that we'll be in a good position to come back to committee probably through the 911 annual report with some more pointy recommendations. And we look forward to those discussions then. Thanks.
I look forward to seeing those recommendations as well. That's all of my questions. Thank you very much to staff for your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Conseiller Plante.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Okay, so sort of piggybacking on what Councillor Bradley was saying, when do we anticipate hiring the 23 FTEs, and will they all be hired by the end of Q4 2025?
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, the 23 FTEs, are you referring to the Ottawa Paramedic Service?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The answer to the question is yes. We'll commence the hiring come January 1st. We usually hire our classes of somewhere between 12 and 16 individuals, and we expect to hire all 23 early in the year. And our hiring practices go on year-round because we also include those individuals who have maybe left the service, retirements, those elements. So we expect to hire somewhere between 40 and 60 individuals next year.
Perfect. Okay. And then for bylaw, when is that the same for the 10 FTEs? It's going to be in January?
Mr. Chair, yes, Councillor, that's correct, as quickly as possible.
Oh, nice. Okay. And also for bylaw, once the city switches over to APS, when does it expect to use APS for items beyond parking tickets?
Mr. Chair, Councillor, I believe APS rollout for parking is slated currently for April. There may be some delays in rolling that on time for April. ASC and red light cameras are currently scheduled to start in September.
September 2025. Okay.
Yes.
And then just lastly, for the Ottawa Paramedic budget highlights, you had medical priority dispatch system, execute the Ottawa Paramedic Service investment plan, patient care models, Byward Market pilot project, mental wellbeing response team. So those last two are very specifically geared towards people who use drugs in the Byward Market. I was wondering if there was anything in there for the residents, like whether it be, more sidewalk clearing in the Byward Market from bylaw because they're often congested. I'm just finding there's a huge focus on a certain population, and I would just wondering if there was anything for the housed population as well.
Through the chair, the paramedic service focus is on community and community health. We believe that by taking care of those individuals who require our services, that we actually bolster the community health on a broader perspective. And of note is that when we take care of individuals in the market, that frees us up in terms of a service to provide a better service to the rest of the community. With respect to housing or those elements, I can't comment directly on those, other than that we continue our discussions with both the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Long-Term Care, and the Ministry of Mental Health to look at other ways that we can integrate in through partnerships, to look at other ways that we can support the community in a broader sense.
Okay, it's just a reminder though, it is traumatizing for the community to be living with that concentration of services as well. Like that's probably the number one thing I see in my inbox is children witnessing overdoses, people doing drugs around schools. It would be helpful if we could get, and I know it's not you specifically that deals with that, but if we could get some help in that. I had suggested when we were looking at the bubble bylaw to look at if we can look at drug use around schools, and I was told that it's not in the work plan. So I'm really hoping we can get a solution soon because it's getting pretty bad.
Chair, if I could just make one final comment. Thank you for that, Councillor. We do work with public health and in discussions with Vera and her team, we're looking at broader community support services, not just for those individuals who may be in a crisis, but also looking at supporting the community in a broader sense. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and I hope it doesn't sound like I'm blaming you. It's just, so the Ontario government announced out of the 17 injection sites in Ontario, they're closing 10, leaving 7, and there'll be 3 in Ward 12 as of April 2025. So that's going to be pretty serious in terms of the concentration of services. So I just wanted to flag that. And we need resources that are geared not just to the people who are using the services, but the people who live there as well, because there's families, we have people living in OCH. And it would just be helpful if I could get more of a sense of where you, like the entire table, where you guys want to go with that. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. So we have Councillor Luloff next and then Councillor Desroches. Councillor Luloff.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chief Hutt, well done on adding the psychologist to your roster. I think that this proactive approach will be incredibly helpful. So I suppose to the chiefs of paramedic and bylaw, can you describe the process that you're making on the care for mental health of your members and in proactively reducing the amount of long-term and short-term disability cases due to mental health in your service?
Chair, through you. Thank you, Councillor, for that question. And I do want to echo what President Dave Andre said as well. We're very fortunate to have this new position of a psychologist within our organization. And the psychologist position is just one position of many things that we do. We continue with all our strategies through peer support. We have a lot of assistance as well from EAP as well. But we have a wellness and fitness program with a joint initiative with our association, which is very successful as well. So it's not just one fix here when it comes to mental health. There's a number of facets that we can leverage to help our members. But I think under the leadership now of the in-house psychologist, where this person can act as a clearinghouse, if you will, and when assistance is needed, we can seek the best avenue for those people. It is very early. We continue to see through presumptive legislation, through WSAB, our WSAB cases continue to rise. I think we're hoping through Matrix with some of the new initiatives with the psychologists that we have on staff that we're going to see some significant improvements in ensuring, and it all boils down to prevention. And that's really where this focus is preventing, it's that training and well-being of our members, before they get to a point where they become sick. So although it's very early, I certainly hope to report back with positive information to committee in the near future.
Yeah, these are sticky issues, and I think that you'll probably see that progress more like further downstream, right? Like we work on prevention now, and then you notice it more in the coming years. So appreciate the effort. I suppose the same question then to Chief Poirier and then to Chief Chapman, please.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. A year earlier, through the 2024 budget, we were given permission to hire 3 individuals in support of mental health initiatives within our service. Early in 2024, we hired a psychologist, and our psychologist, my apologies for saying it as a possessive term, Dr. Sophie Gianalso, has been working with the psychologist from Ottawa Fire Services in terms of collaborative approach. Next year, I hope to report back on a wellness strategy for our service, which will be inclusive of not just a psychologist, but of the 2 other FTE that have been noted, possibly a social worker and occupational therapist, with the intent of how can we better keep our staff at work and not deal with the back end where they're already off work. So we're excited about the opportunity. We're working through the strategy right now. And as a quick note, we've already seen a slight reduction in our WSIB costs in 2024 for. So more to report on that. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. An ounce of prevention is certainly worth a pound of cure.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Councillor, for the question. So for bylaw and regulatory services, proud to announce that we did launch our peer support program earlier this year. And it's obviously a very important engagement for our team. So the peer support team right now does debrief on all incidents, minor or major, involving our staff. And I can also say that Chief Poirier and Chief Hutt have both offered the services of their psychologist when needed, when our staff are involved in major incidents as well.
That's excellent. I really like to see the collaboration between the three services. Keep that up. That's really wonderful. Chief Hutt, where is OFS at when it comes to replacement of gear with PFAS-free material? I realize this technology is quite new, and I mean we heard that from President Andre. But is this something that your team is actively looking into?
Chair, thank you for that question. Yes, the PFAS is very complicated. It's very technical from a science perspective as well. What I can share though is, and I certainly don't want to sound reckless when I say this, but I know we started talking about costs, what the cost difference is. I think when it comes to safety and well-being of our members, if there's products out there that we can look at that can prevent cancer-causing illnesses, then I think we have to seriously look at that. With that being said, the president identified this as well. PFAS is in everything. We look around this room; it's in the carpet. It's in your outdoor clothing that you have. It's a product used to repel water, and so it's still a new phenomenon that's being looked at right now. In conjunction with our association, the International Association of Firefighters have piloted, and Ottawa Fire Service were fortunate to be part of that pilot project where we have members piloting PFAS-free gear, and that did take place, and it's currently receiving some analysis and test results as to what those results are. So we are working very closely with the association on this initiative. We're also working very closely with our other associations across, nationally as well as provincially, as to what direction we're going. We talk about PFAS-free gear, but then we also have to look at if we go that route, is there concerns from a thermal protection perspective as well? And so those things, we have to take it very serious. We have to look at the evidence and the science behind it. But you certainly have our commitment to look at all those initiatives moving forward as we receive more information.
Thanks, Chief. I understand how complicated this is because it really is in absolutely everything. It's in cling wrap. It's the stuff that coats your pizza box. And as soon as you're dealing with combustion, that's in the air, that's everywhere. It's going to be very difficult to protect members from all PFAS. So I just really appreciate that this is a complicated issue that you're looking at. Chief Poirier, the community paramedic program has been wildly successful, especially for our rural and more experienced residents. Can you tell us a little bit more about how this budget is going to continue to support that program?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. We have several community programs, probably close to a dozen or so, and they are principally funded through 100% funding through the province.
Excellent.
And we continue to advocate that what is grant funding through the province become program funding, as in base funding on a year-by-year basis. We continue to report on the inquiries that the province makes. They are very much aware of and your words I'm not sure if they were your words in terms of fantastic results.
Yeah.
But we continue to respond to the province. They give us positive feedback that they are willing to continue their support for these programs. And we remain an absolute advocate in terms of their benefit, not just for the community and population health, but also for how it supports the rest of our service, our 911 service, in terms of the reduction in the number of responses that we receive, and also the number of transports that are required to take people to the hospital. So we continue to be an absolute advocate for community programs. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And so when the province decides to take on 100% funding of a program that you're running, is that above and beyond the 50-50 split when it comes for regular paramedic services? I know that basically the province matches us dollar for dollar for everyday paramedic service, but when there's an additional program that is entirely funded by the province, is that above and beyond that 50-50, or is that factored in when they look at those budgets?
Through the chair, it is 100% funded by the province, and it is separate and distinct from what is 50-50 funded. So if you look at our overall budget, I think if I use broad numbers, we're around 150 million. Almost 85 million comes from the province and 65 from the city. So that differential or that is twofold. One is that our communication center is 100% funded by the province, but also our community programs are 100% funded by the province. So there is no city component directly to that, other than the sunk costs that go with the administration that we undertake to provide that service. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Thanks, Chief. Chief Poirier and Chief Hutt, have the schools caught up post-pandemic? I know that it was very difficult, especially in the immediate years and throughout the lockdown periods, to compete with other municipalities for reduced amount of talent. Is that situation getting better? Are you able to recruit the right people, the right amount of people, or is that still a challenge?
Through the chair, a couple of years ago, and I'm not sure the Ministry of Education and Advanced Education, I'm not sure of the title, they approved an expansion in the number or the enrollment at the colleges, particularly Algonquin College. And specific to the issue, have we had difficulty recruiting? The answer is no. But to put it in context, where we used to get 500 applicants for a call for new recruits for, say, the 40 jobs that we would have in the next year. Last year, I think we got less than 200. So we were still able to absolutely hire the number of staff we required. It's just that the recruitment pool has shrunk. And the expectation is that it may continue to shrink in coming years. Thank you.
And Chief Hutt, same situation?
Chair, thank you for that question. Fire service continues to be extremely competitive. We have a number of applications, and so from on the urban recruitment side of things, we continue our endeavors from inclusive EDI perspective lens, and so we're not having difficulty certainly on the urban side. We're not seeing that even with the introduction in 2018 of the provincial certification. We still have significant amount of applicants applying for positions. On the rural side, communities are growing, so we are, the rural program are out there advocating for new volunteers. Some smaller hamlets that aren't seeing as much growth, there requires a little more recruitment aspects in those areas, but for the most part, we're not seeing any significant recruitment challenges at this time.
Excellent. And my final question, Mr. Chair, is the cadre of rural firefighters, is that still the largest pool available to you moving over to the urban side, or are you doing more hiring outside of the organization?
We have a system that we believe is fair and equitable for everybody, regardless of where they live. So although they're volunteer members within our service already, they still have to go through the same recruitment process and aspects as everybody else that applies to our service. We want to ensure that we keep the transparency, integrity, and we also want to ensure that we're focusing on representing members of our communities. So it's not just from the rural members, although they certainly are eligible and qualified to apply. It is a fair and equitable, transparent process for all members across the city and elsewhere.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Luloff. Councillor DesRoches, you're next, and then Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. Is it true that there's no, or is it correct that there's no share of the payment in lieu of taxes for these branches?
Through the chair, so the answer is no, it's not true. The reality is what happens is our payment in lieu taxes comes into the big city pot, and then we allocate a portion to Ottawa Police because they have a separate levy. We allocate a portion to transit because they have a separate levy. Then the rest remains in the city's budget, and that helps fund all services within the citywide services umbrella.
Okay, so why would we display in the table a zero?
It's
Yeah.
zero because there's nothing there, nothing that goes there.
Pardon me?
It's zero because there's no money allocated to that line item.
Okay, okay. So these branches would get a share of this is the answer of the PILTs.
At a global level or at the top corporate level. So the format of all of our templates are the same. So you'll see in most, if not all the templates, other than the non-departmental template in FinCorp, that line is zero because we don't push the PILT revenue, nor do we push our property taxation revenue down to the different services. We hold the taxation revenue at the non-departmental account. And then throughout the year in our final disposition report, we allocate that out to what we call the business areas, specifically transit and Ottawa Police Services. All these other service areas within the city remains what we call above the line from an accounting perspective. And then the non-departmental shows it there.
Okay. I know we're looking every year, we look at the formatting of the budget and how we improve how people read it. And I think this is an area where we really need to show where the PILTs are applied and where the gaps are. And I think we do the federal government a favor when it's a little more complicated to understand where that money is going and how it's being applied to some of the frontline services that surely serve the federal building. So I'll just leave you with that maybe for next year. I'm happy to see that we're hiring some psychological services in the branch. I will support it, of course. I'm wondering if this has any impact on our insurance provider. I'm sure they're happy because potentially there would be fewer claims to the insurance provider. So I'm wondering if that's something we're going to track. And then when we go into negotiations with our insurance provider, that we would say, hey, we're doing a lot of this work here proactively. It's reducing our draw on your services. And that's a part of our negotiation with them. So we keep some of the dues money in the pockets of the members and as well keep our share as low as it can be. So is that something we're going to watch to see if there'll be fewer claims as a result?
Sorry, the first part of the question.
With the hiring of the psychological services within these branches.
Yeah, so through the chair. So that's one of the things we watch closely. Like from a global corporate HR perspective, we do look at the areas in the organization where WSIB, sick leave, those elements are more prevalent. We tend to see that more in this service. We see it a bit in transit. We see it in our long-term care homes. So it's in those core services where that are kind of more germane to those types of elevated claims. So we're also working closely with our colleagues and our partners in terms of looking at HR corporate programs to help that and looking at, how can we better improve the overall cost structure and ultimately get our staff back to work and serve our staff. So we are working closely with each of the departments on that.
Yeah, I appreciate it in the long-term care, but I'm talking about those day-to-day, someone might call the helpline or the employee assistance program, say, I want some psychological services. They go through all the hoops to get it. They may not need to do that now because there's some in-house services. So how can we monitor those transactions from our healthcare providers?
So through the chair, I mean, the services that have that is in paramedics and fire. So I'll leave it to Pierre to answer and Chief if they have a different mechanism for tracking that. But when a normal in the services that don't have that dedicated resource, it flows through our EAP program. So we obviously we have metrics from our EAP provider to manage that, but I can't speak to if Pierre's team has something separate for your side.
Through the chair, probably the most baseline metric for us from a financial point of view is looking at our WSAB costs that are related to mental health. And since 2016, when presumptive legislation came into place where PTSD or PD was recognized as a work-related injury, our costs ballooned. And that's been our advocacy of why we needed these supporting staff. So our first metric that we're looking at from a financial point of view is our WSAB costs. And that's why I mentioned earlier that we've already seen a slight decrease. And that'll be something that we track year over year, recognizing that our costs went up 2.5 times in the last 8 years. And I'm motivated to find ways of reducing that. Thank you, Chair.
Good. I think my point is really, let's just monitor this. And if we're seeing that this service is being used, which I'm sure it will be, and that we are filing fewer claims, we are seeing fewer people calling out to the employee assistance program, that the insurance provider should see that positively, and that should be reflected in the rates that we pay to them if it is significant. My question to bylaw, similar to some other questions that have come earlier, how will those new FTEs be applied? And I guess at the heart of it, will there be a citywide benefit in terms of the deployment of the officers to deal with the various complaints that come in from all parts of the city?
Mr. Chair, Councillor, thank you for the question. So again, we're looking at priority areas where to deploy the staff. Obviously, 2 areas that we're focusing on right now is in property standards as well as in the short-term rental enforcement area. But in addition to the FTEs, we're also looking at some efficiencies in a deployment model and how we can better serve our communities. So, I mean, that's very important to us, is that, we get quicker response times across the city and be able to provide the service that that the residents of Ottawa expect.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate the commitment that this will be a citywide response to the pressures that you're seeing right across the city in terms of the calls from residents and businesses. Was going over the list of fee increases. Many of them are within the inflationary range. I noticed some are 0, which is positive, and particularly the spray and neuter clinic. So that is a bright light, I think, that with all the pressures that we're under, that we're holding the line on those fees. So someone speak to those fees and how we're holding the line on those so that we can make sure that those services are affordable to people and more cats and dogs are sprayed and or neutered.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question, Councillor. So yes, we didn't have any increases related to the spay and neuter clinic this year. As you may recall, last year we did have some significant increases there at the spay and neuter clinic. Again, trying to align the cost of the service with the with some of the cost of the products and things that increased considerably in 2023. So those inflationary costs were reflected in the 2024 budget. And doing the analysis, we didn't see the need to increase them for 2025.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kavanagh, you're next, followed by Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you to everyone at the table for all your work. I think we've all had meetings together, and your work is very valuable to all of us. We've worked through many complicated cases, for example, with bylaw, and I can really understand the need for more officers because it's not just one call. Usually you have to go back several times on complicated situations, for example, short-term rental and many other issues. I won't get into that right now. But thank you for all your work and patience with these calls. We heard this morning from the Ambleside clinics, the wellness clinics, and we heard what a great success they are. And I want to thank again the paramedic portion of that. And it's a great partnership. And I want to ask for paramedic services if you agree that this has been a great success.
Mr. Chair, Councillor, absolutely. We view these clinics as important to the community health, individual health for those affected seniors, but also from a service perspective where it actually helps improve our 911 service by building capacity at that end. Thank you.
Great. It is considered like a pilot project, and we recently had one yesterday in Carlingwood Library. I'm anxious to hear how that went. But it sounds like this is something that can be done across the city and would eventually save money in terms of reducing the calls for emergency services. Is it possible to expand it, and where would it be in the budget? Because I'm looking at wellness clinics is not listed in the budget. Maybe I missed it, but what is the plans to expand the programs?
Currently, I think I mentioned earlier through the chair that this is 100% funded by the province through several programs, notably Community Paramedic Long-Term Care or Community Paramedic Plus, Long-Term Care Plus. We have several programs, and they're loosely defined, and we're required to provide I guess, metrics on the performance of those. So we've taken the initiatives in different areas, and one of the areas we've taken the initiative is in these community clinics. So long as the funding is grant funding, we will maximize that funding in terms of the number of clinics we'll provide. As we move into a more program basis, and the province is also appreciative of the good work that's taking place, we will consider expanding the clinics in a more broad sense, where there is community need, not just from a perspective of possibly keeping seniors healthy, but also looking at community housing where we have individuals who may have higher health needs. So this is kind of the work that's being done currently right now, is looking at how we can expand the clinics within the budget envelope that we have. And that is specifically under different programs that we have through the ministries of long-term care, the Ministry of Health.
Thank you. Are you or are we as a city advocating with the province to expand these programs? I think it's very important that we tell them the success of the ones that we're operating, and how can we grow it so that it'll save money for the healthcare system, for sure.
Chair, we're absolute advocates in support of these clinics. For the two reasons mentioned before. One is it supports the health of the individuals, population health, but it also supports our 911 service to the community. Thank you.
Is there anything further we can do? For example, if we ask the mayor to write to the Ministry of Health, maybe Dr. Philpott could listen to us and hear about all this wonderful work.
I guess from my end, through the chair, I'm not the politician, but just to make note of Dr. Philpott, she's been involved in the original studies on community paramedicine going back 15 years, and she is an advocate for the service that we're providing to the communities through community paramedics. Thank you, Chair.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just add as well, and on top of what Chief Poirier just indicated, in providing those metrics back to the province as well, that's also our opportunity at the staff level to demonstrate how well these clinics are doing, and to support, potentially expanding more into the future. That dialogue is open with the province.
This is good to hear. I really think that we just can't let this go. This is a success, and everybody wants it. It started in Bay Ward in the Ambleside buildings, and all I'm hearing is, when can I get it? But especially with the shortage of family doctors, this is very, very valuable. And not that they still have to look for family doctors, but this is helping so much for the thousands of people that need just to have someone check in, and the partnership as well with our community health centers is incredibly valuable. So I hope that will be continued as well. Thank you. My next question is in terms of for on bylaw and on the legislative side. Thank you, Valerie, for all your work. Currently, I know you're working on the renoviction and demoviction reports on that. I always worry about that we don't have enough resources just to get these things out. Are we set up in terms of, you've got one more full-time equivalent? Will that help us to set up new bylaws to help those that are victims of being thrown out of their homes based on renovictions and demevictions?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to say that we are on track for reporting out on council's direction for the feasibility assessment for renovictions bylaw. Right now, we are tracking to report out on that in Q1 of next year. The resource that you see in the 2025 budget is already existing on a temporary basis and certainly contributed to that. Will contribute to the second feasibility assessment we've been directed to do, which is the bubble bylaw, as well as all the other bylaw reviews that are on the council approved work plan.
Thank you again for all your work on this. I think it's really important, and we're all anxious to hear as we hear of more people out there. At Planning and Housing Committee, we talked about all the people that are losing affordable housing, and this is one way we can tackle it through these bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh, Vice Chair Hill, and then Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll reinforce a theme that I've heard all morning, and that is one of appreciation. Certainly, GM and chiefs and directors. For me personally, also from my residents in Barrhaven, I just want to amplify the voice that we're just so appreciative of everything that you do, and the fact that your folks in uniform go out day in and day out, and they take difficult decisions, and they get into risky situations, and they do that on our behalf, and it's greatly appreciated. GM. Can you just confirm for me that this budget provides you the adequate resources that you require to your department so that they can effectively carry out their mandate?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. Short answer is yes, with the caveat that, as you're aware, every year we come back with our annual reports. We continue to monitor and track performance of all of our services across the department. So what's before you today is based on, the projections that we're looking at within the service demand across all of our service areas. And we're proposing some very strategic investments in those areas. But we continue to monitor what that demand looks like. And if we do see something that goes above and beyond what we've been projecting, that's something that we would bring back to this committee for further consideration.
Thank you, and I appreciate that response. And so I can now extend my thanks to Mr. Rogers. That was my first read of this budget as well. I think this is positive. I appreciate greatly the increases that I'm seeing in some of the uniformed members, which I think is required given the growth of the city and the requirements that we have out here. A bit more technically, we're spending $17.9 million on the renewal and new capital assets for the department this year, $14.4 million of which will be funded through reserves and only $1.5 million through debt financing. Can you please speak to why we're using reserve funds instead of debt financing on what will presumably be long-term assets?
Through the chair, so typically these would be what I would deem as not long-term assets because it's mostly equipment and the vehicles. So typically equipment and vehicles tend to be that 5, maybe 7 years, where we try and make sure we get, best bang for buck or value for money on debt, if that makes sense to people around the table, is on those 30, 40-year assets. So if you go through all the committee books, we tend to push most of our debt on the 30, 40, 20 for roads. But that way we get better value and better servicing on a better mortgage rate on those longer term assets.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I'd like to dwell on one of the comments my colleague brought up and was reference to in the delegation from Cheryl this morning on the short-term rentals. Certainly, from a macro perspective, I have concerns with the way that we're implementing the vacant unit tax. And I think that there is a nexus between the short-term rentals in the residential stock of the city right now and how the short-term rental bylaw, the vacant unit bylaw, and the vacant unit tax all kind of come together. And so I would just like to hear some reassurance, I suppose, from bylaw on the progress of the short-term rental bylaw and perhaps the vacant unit bylaw from the perspective of its intended purposes, so that we have a good understanding that we're moving and trending in the right direction. And if there are requirements from your perspective in terms of making some policy changes, such was recommended, I think, to increase the minimum length of stay, if that's something that you think from a policy perspective would move us further along in those objectives.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Councillor. I'll start with the first part. So how we're trending in enforcement related to short-term rentals. I mean, I think it's fair to say that we could never have anticipated, the workload during the development of the bylaw. I can say that, it has been resource heavy. We've redeployed resources when needed, specifically during renewal time. This time of year where additional resources are needed, but we do have a robust licensing team that's trained in this area as well. So they're cross-trained, so we can redeploy staff as needed at peak times of the year. Just to provide some numbers, so we have issued about 1,000 STR permits so far since the introduction of the legislation. We have 500 pending permits right now. So those are permits that are currently through the processing stage of getting inspections done and obtaining additional documents that are required and such in order to seek approval and issue the permit. We've also removed 1,000 listings from the platforms, which is very important. So these are hosts that have put a listing on the platform that shouldn't have. They're not their primary residence, or there's issues with insurance, or there's fraudulent permits being used, things like that. So those we've had 1,000 of those removed. We've issued 300 charges, and we've had 2,250 service requests so far. So, with currently 6 dedicated staff on that team, those investigations are complex. They often require hours of monitoring the properties and things like that. So to gather evidence in order to be able to issue those charges. So are we trending in the right direction? Yes. Is additional resource or 2 required in that area? Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we're looking to address with these 10 new FTs. On the second question, I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Valerie in case she has any additional comments. But I think by increasing and I appreciate everything that Cheryl Parrott has said in regards to, I have a lot of respect for Cheryl. I've known Cheryl for many years. But I think on this one, we may miss the mark. I think that this may actually cause more problems for us by increasing the minimum, the 30-day to 90 days. I think it's going to possibly drive more long-term rentals to short-term rentals, which is not what our objective is. And I think it's going to increase the need for enforcement in that area as well. So higher costs as well. I'll turn it over to Valerie.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I expect that the short-term rental bylaw will be one of the bylaws that we recommend for review next term of council. The 30-day limit, as well as a few other things, are on our radar to track. The bylaw came into force in mid-2022, so still relatively new. Next term of council will have several years of data under our belt, and we'll be able to address any fine-tuning tweaks that may be required. With respect to the 90-day limit, I'm only aware of one jurisdiction that has put that in place, and that is BC. It was only put in place, I think, this spring. So I'd be interested in seeing the effects of that on long-term leases versus short-term rentals, administration and enforcement data. We'll be looking at that. And as I say, I expect that this will be one of the bylaws we recommend for review next term.
I appreciate that very much. Certainly, any place where traditional residential stock can be used for long-term housing is an objective I think that we want to try to get towards. So I appreciate that very much. And again, thank you very much to all of you for the work that you do and for your members. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair, Councillor Devine, and then Johnson and Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. So thank you very much, directors, GMs, beg your pardon, Perot and Rogers. Thank you, chiefs and directors. Very glad to have you here. And I don't mind saying, keep it yourselves or not, but some of my favorite civic leaders in the city of Ottawa are sitting before me. Always very grateful to speak to you. I am confident that some of the best value for money on the delivery of core services come within this committee. I am always grateful for that, as well as the innovations of how to work with limited resources coming from within this committee. So I'm very, very grateful for that. So yeah, I do have a couple questions, comments. So I'll start, Chief Poirier. So I, as many others and many residents across the city, are very grateful for the new paramedics and the new ambulances and to your fleet. And this is a comment, more a question, expectations of good things to come. I have heard and observed that we are finally seeing some improvements to our offload delay at hospitals. I'm very, very grateful for that. I'm sure that's through your offices, but also likely, hopefully, some effective advocacy from the ministry. So I just want to commend your office for any improvements we're seeing in the city of Ottawa. And I expect we're going to hear more good news over the coming months. So just thank you for that. And I look forward to good news. But if you look like you're leaning towards the mic, sir.
Through the chair, thank you for the comment, Councillor. Yes, recently over the last 5 weeks or so, there has been a concerted effort by the hospitals to reduce offload delays. We've seen a positive decrease in that number. I'm looking forward that we have 3 months or 6 months worth of data to report back on it. But credit to the cooperative relationship or partnership that we've had with all of the hospitals, the 3 hospitals in the city, and their commitment to this issue. And, you know, to go one step further, I think the Ministry of Health has heard the advocacy that's come through this council, committee and council, saying that it is a real problem. The ministry has, I think, given direction or provided a strong bit of influence to the hospitals to work with their partners in the municipalities to reduce that offload delay. So I'm looking forward to being able to report on a broader sample size. Thank you, Chair.
I am sure you are, and I appreciate you crediting good partnerships, but we don't have good partnerships unless we have good partners. So thank you for being good partners in that relationship. Over to public safety. Director Gooding, I am always grateful and happy to work with your office on what you know is an area of consistent concern for myself. From the presentation you gave before, there was mention of a new, I believe the term was a new security advisor. Would you mind letting me know a little bit of details about what that is? And is that an external hire and what might they be doing?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. And yes, it would be an external hire. Globally, the new employee will help us to ensure that we continue to meet the needs of our clients and the residents who use and visit city facilities. It's really important, I think, to underline here that safety and security underpins the success of all city programming at all facilities. And every once in a while, it's important to make small steps to right-size our program against demand. But more specifically, what we're also trying to do is to better leverage and augment capacity specific to security systems and data analysis. I do want to commend my colleague, Manager Bietlo, because she's always reminding us of the need to be evidence-based and data-driven. And so we are making some small enhancements to better leverage our data analysis, including incorporating some potential uses of artificial intelligence so that any enhancements we make to our security policies and programs are based on data.
Thank you for that. The other question I had, so I saw that in your presentation you were making reference to what I assume would be advancements or improvements at community level emergency preparedness. Again, very important topic to me personally and professionally. But with regards to Budget 2025, could you speak to any specific advancements or implementations, deliverables that can I expect to see from within that program, i.e. not just the conceptual stage, but the tangible on the ground deliverables from community level emergency preparedness?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, and it's an important discussion. In terms of Budget 2025, so I should highlight that community resiliency remains an ongoing priority for the Office of Emergency Management. In terms of Budget 2025, though, what we're actually doing is working collaboratively with the new Strategic Initiatives Department on the climate resiliency file. They have access to supplemental funding that is we're leveraging to augment capacity specific to climate change initiatives. And this is the community resiliency priority. And so, for example, what we're trying to do is do more community-based information sessions and also improve our guidance documents. The Federal Emergency Management Agency in the United States has done some really interesting studies, and they found that particularly for people who haven't gone through very many emergencies, one info session, one guidance document is not enough. You have to keep providing different types of guidance and different formats over and over again. And so we're trying to expand the breadth and depth of our reach through different presentations and materials. The other thing is that we continue to engage with local community partners. So for example, we are working with Ottawa Public Health to engage residents in Ottawa community housing through engagement and guidance documents as well. And as part of our community resiliency, we're really encouraging any organized entity that is interested and has the capacity to consider developing their own community-based plans. And so we are improving our outreach with community associations, faith-based groups, and others. And because this is a public forum, I do want to also take the opportunity to market. We really want to engage more with private sector entities, and so that's also on our agenda. Thank you.
I do not mind you marketing that at all. Thank you. Over to you, Director Chapman. So first of all, I am sure that every councillor is happy about the new FTE officers. I think that's been something that council has been advocating for a while. So thank you for implementing that to your budget. And I don't mind commending publicly, as I've mentioned to you, in the last few months, your team has been so excellently responsive, at least to my office, and in responding to things in such a timely way, not just timely, but an effective way, like getting problems solved within days. It's been amazing. So your team is doing excellent work with the resources they have, and I look forward to even better work in 2025. So thank you for that. I want to turn within bylaw. I want to turn to animals for a little bit, and specifically I want to talk about the spay and neuter clinic, and to a degree I feel like I'm the Bob Barker of City Council, always asking people to have their animals spayed and neutered. I'm old enough to be Bob. It is indeed. All the kids at home going, who's Bob? So we've had this conversation before in that, and I did notice in the 2024 budget that there's a lower, let's say a lower than historic amount of revenues from our spay and neuter clinic. And I surmise from conversations I've had with your office that this is due to the fact that the city of Ottawa has had in recent years a problem attaining, recruiting, securing a veterinarian for our spay and neuter clinic. And we have had diminished capacity at that clinic for a while. The unfortunate consequence of that is that people who need their animals neutered are either going to private clinics at a greater expense or having to go outside the city. My concern is that with this kind of crisis of not being able to spay and neuter animals, that problem gets exponentially worse. And so knowing that that is a concern I'm worried about, is there anything in the 2025 budget that can help improve the City of Ottawa's capacity at our spay and neuter clinic?
Mr. Chair, Councillor, thank you for the question. Yes, 2024 was a struggle at spay and neuter clinic, trying to hire a new veterinarian. So we lost our veterinarian as of January of 2024. So we did have a contingency plan with contracted vets and locum vets. And as much as possible, we were able to schedule surgeries on a regular basis. This resulted in probably about 60% of the surgeries in 2024, compared to previous years. So as you've alluded to, there was, a significant revenue loss as a result of those, far fewer surgeries being performed throughout 2024. I can announce today that we have been successful in hiring a new veterinarian, and she's prepared to start in February of 2025. So we're proud to make that announcement today, and so we're looking forward to a better year in 2025 for our spay and neuter clinic.
Christmas in November. Thank you, Director. That is fantastic news. Thank you very, very much. Last but not least, and speaking of Christmas, Chief Hutt. I am, as I was mentioned, I am very, very consistently grateful for Ottawa Fire Service's ability to meet, exceed set standards for performance delivery. So thank you very much for that. But going back to the issue of marketing, Director Gooding, I don't mind doing a little bit of marketing for Ottawa Fire Services. If you haven't already secured your stocking stuffers for this year, Ottawa Fire Service has produced just about the most adorable stocking stuffer I've ever seen. So Ottawa Fire Service has produced a calendar of firefighters, not just the sexy firefighters, but firefighters actually posed in photos with the babies that they rescued this year from the NICU unit at Ottawa Hospital. It is the most innovative, speaking of innovations, marketing that I've seen come out of the city of Ottawa for a while. So thank you for that. I've already ordered 2. And I go shopping, everybody. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. We appreciate that. Councillor Johnson and Kelly.
Thanks, Chair. I'll try and keep it brief. So for the Public Safety Service Director, Gooding, thank you. So to follow up on my colleagues' questions about the Special Security Advisor, I can see how, you know, in an increasingly complex world, we might need to have an external person come in. But, you know, I would hope that that would be in response to, you know, the city as a public institution, first and foremost, right? So I think of an example in my ward where at the library, in a building, we had someone come in several times throughout a week that was clearly in distress, but was very antagonistic and violent. It was a scary situation, but I wouldn't want the response then to be that we need to have a security measure in place at a library necessarily as a response. So can you assure me that this individual will be working within the context of, you know, access and inclusion, first and foremost, using the lens that most of our frontline individuals would bring to those types of interactions, please?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. And again, this is another really important discussion, so I appreciate the opportunity to comment. I will say a couple things. So first of all, we definitely prioritize equity, diversity, and inclusion in our hiring and in our programming. And so we are making sure that we provide training to all those working in the security program on things like unconscious bias, cultural awareness. And we always want to, secondly, make sure that our presence and the measures we put in place are commensurate with risk in the operating environment. And as we've discussed at previous meetings, it really is to minimize and to focus on prevention rather than response. So that is why we are enhancing our programming, but more from a behind the scenes security systems, data analysis, client support perspective.
Okay. Yeah, I find those comments reassuring, but I find one of the challenges when we talk about security is obviously it's not publicly shared often, you know, to what extent the threats are being seen. I mean, we can certainly see in other jurisdictions like Edmonton, you know, where we had some danger at City Hall. We could look at examples like that, but I just want to be sure that we're approaching this with as you say, a balanced and data-driven approach. So I'd be satisfied there. Can you just describe, I see in the materials and services line for the public safety service, there's a cost escalation there. Can you describe for me whether this is increased, you know, whether it's just a cost escalation of inflation or whether there's new materials and services that are part of that line that weren't in previous years?
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, for the question. For 2025, any cost increases are primarily being driven by the city's corporate radio system and the requirements we have. It's a 10-year-old system, and so we are renewing our contract and updating the infrastructure. And so that's the primary cost driver in 2025. And this is a system that we consider to be critical infrastructure for the city. It's used by all frontline resources, including our emergency services.
Okay, thank you. And I believe part of what we had discussed in previous meetings was also potentially the opportunity to use text messages as a means of communicating with the public. Are there any costs or expenses associated with that in this budget, or is that still to come?
Thanks again for the question, Mr. Chair. So no, there are no costs associated with that system in this budget. In fact, we recently closed a request for tender, and we believe the contract will be signed in 2024, actually, and put in place as a system in 2025.
Well, tremendous. Okay, very good. Thank you for the responses, and I'll also mention, you know, I appreciate that Bell's Corners is on the map, and we're working with the Legion to try and get an additional facility online. I was curious to know if additional emergency centers were part of the increasing material and services cost line, but you're saying it's mostly to do with the radio. Okay, I can see you
That's
nodding.
correct. Yeah.
Many thanks. Okay, so moving to Director Chapman, please. So there's been a lot of attention, obviously, on your 10 new bylaw officers. We all are saying gimme, gimme, which is, as I say before, you're the most popular and also the least liked when you're out in the community. And it is just a tough role that your guys play, and you also have a good sense of humor. That's why I know I can get away with that. But that being said, we're hearing that your demands in 2024 when it came to supporting demonstrations and protests was very taxing at the earlier part of the year. Are you forecasting any type of pressure in 2025 with these new FTEs? Is that going to cover off the pressure that you experienced at the beginning of 2024, or has that de-escalated somewhat?
Mr. Chair, Councillor, thank you for the question. Specifically to resources involved or required for support around the protests and demonstrations that are happening throughout the city, I can say that there has been a significant decrease in the amount of protests that we've been involved in since I would say around April of 2024. Although we have seen a bit of an increase in some protests recently. So we'll continue to support the Ottawa Police and where enforcement's needed around those protests, but I don't anticipate a significant need for resources in 2025 related to protests and demonstrations.
And is some of that pressure alleviated by some of the investments that the Ottawa Police Service has received directly to support their work in the National Capital Region when it comes to demonstrations, or is it exclusive to your own observations?
Mr. Chair, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I would say that, whatever resources the police are using, I know that there's better communication between the organizers of the protests and demonstrations and enforcement. So that is substantially decreased the need for enforcement during these events. We always say that communication is so important, but really when it comes down to activities and that are happening on the streets and sidewalks of Ottawa and related to protests and demonstrations, I mean, involvement and engaging with those organizers is extremely important.
Okay, tremendous. I mean, certainly we've seen the suburbs being activated in a way that they've not yet been activated on protests and demonstrations. So we may find that 2025 is a spicy year. We shall see. So I'm asking on behalf of my colleagues, but not myself, because I have no feelings about this. But when it comes to off-leash dog park activities and the monitoring of off-leash dog infractions, are we seeing the 10 new bylaw officers being deployed for any of those reasons?
Mr. Chair, Councillor, thank you for the question. Again, I would say that, we've seen a substantial increase in our deployment of summer students over the last several years, which has been extremely effective and efficient for us to, during the summer months, to be able to increase not just enforcement, but more education with the public in the parks, specifically around, dogs on and off leash and those specific areas. So I would say that we've seen a decline in complaints and incidents in the parks utilizing our summer student program. So we anticipate continuing to do that in 2025. We'll have the same amount of summer students deployed again.
Okay, fantastic. And just final question, please, Chair, and this would be to Chief Poirier, please. So on a personal note, I lost my aunt a couple months ago, and she's in the Niagara region, and they had a palliative paramedic response. And so she was able to pass at home. And that was a really profound experience for the family. They were, oh, here I go. But, they were brought into the conversation. They knew what to anticipate in terms of her behavior. They knew how to respond as family members. And it was done in a very sort of quiet way, right? And that was really impactful. And I wonder, what I believe you might have a response like that, but I also wonder, not to be dark, but like with an aging population and with, older adults actually being healthy longer and perhaps not having the same complex needs, perhaps being able to die at home more easily, is there a population sort of response when we see, maybe 25% of Ottawa will be of a certain age imminently, as we heard yesterday?
Through the chair, there's a couple of things to unpack there. First and foremost, we do have a palliative care program here in Ottawa, and it's been several years. One of the interesting linkages is through our community paramedic programs, where we often enroll patients in the palliative program through our contacts within the community and our community paramedic programs, much like a neighborhood event that we have. So that's one of our linkages back to palliative as a community basis. Also, the last piece is that paramedics, and a little bit more sensitive issue, is that we're also starting to provide that linkage through MAID programs where people choose to die at home. So we're sensitive to the issue in the broadest sense. We're absolute advocates for palliative care in the home, and we are trying to develop stronger linkages within our community paramedic programs to those palliative patients or those individuals who may be thinking or seeking palliative care. Thanks for the inquiry, Councillor, through Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Kelly, you're up now, followed by Councillor King.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My first question, which will come as no surprise, is for Mr. Poirier and the paramedic service. And want to, first of all, take the time to thank you, Mr. Poirier, for the time that you take to communicate with me in my office on this issue. And obviously understanding through our conversations that the key challenge here is offload delay, and there's lots of conversations happening about, how we fix that. But I'm also wondering at the same time if there is any strategies that you're working on or ideas that you could explain today that could potentially have an effect on the ability to deploy more quicker in rural Ottawa.
Through the chair, thanks for the inquiry. Rural response times is very much front of mind for the Ottawa Paramedic Service. And quite honestly, Councillor, and through the chair, over the last several years where offload delays have significantly increased, it has had an impactful or a negative effect on our response times in the rural areas. And we are taking a look seriously at how we can improve that. So first and foremost was our initiatives with the hospitals to reduce offload delays, which we're seeing a positive impact. The second piece is with respect to the investment plan that committee and council has undertaken for additional paramedics, that we see that as also bolstering our ability to improve our response times in the rural areas. A third item is that as of last April, when the implementation of MPDS, the algorithm in our dispatch center, the call taking algorithm, we've seen an improvement in terms of how we can manage calls better. So my expectation is that with the additional staff that we have, with the reductions in offload delays, and the new dispatch algorithm, we're going to see improved response times. We've already noted the improvement in the last several months, and we expect greater improvements in the months to come. The last piece is that as we've taken a look at our deployment of resources, the fact that our staff are not being held, and I'll say held captive in the emergency department, that we're able actually to get our staff out into the community and deploy them where they should be, which improves the response time in rural areas. So from an operational point of view, we're looking at it internally as how can we better improve our deployment of our resources so that we can provide a better service to Osgood, Metcalfe, North Gore, and Kinburn. So we're very much focused on that issue, and thanks for the inquiry.
Thank you very much, Chief. That's great news, and I'm happy to hear that the new dispatch system has already, realized an improvement in those response times. And I know that level zeros were a very popular topic for several years coming out of the pandemic. Has the implementation of these strategies and the new dispatch system, has that had an effect on the number of level zeros in our city? Are they dropping? Are they rising? Are they staying the same? What's the current state of level zeros in the city of Ottawa?
Through the chair, in 2022, I think it was 73,000 minutes. 23 was 55,000 minutes. And when you add that, make that into weeks, I think 73,000 minutes was like 7 weeks of level zero. In 2024, we've seen a significant reduction in level zero. I would say that, and I don't have the exact number in front of me for this year, but we'll be probably less than 15,000 minutes, of which most of that occurred early in the year. So we've seen a huge decrease in level zero. I sleep much better at night, just based on the fact that when it does occur, it's for a few seconds or for a minute, not for, let's say, hours at a time, which did occur previously. So we're very optimistic about the fact of all of these changes that are occurring are helping to bolster our service to the community. And we will be reporting specifically as part of our annual report on level zeros. But right now, it has been very much a positive response in the last several months. Thank you.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you very much. One of the things that I think is most comforting for my residents and rural residents generally is that the way ambulances are dispatched is we get the one that is closest to us, which often means that in my ward, we're getting responses from other jurisdictions like Renfrew County or Lanark. And I'm just wondering, is there scenarios in this region where that flips? Like, are the Ottawa paramedic service responding outside of the city of Ottawa regularly as well? And could you comment on how often that's happening?
Through the chair, the last part of your inquiry is, yes, we do respond outside the city. Probably the area that we most respond to would be the Embrun area, which is part of Prescott Russell. We also do respond into Cornwall and their community, or SDNG, in the area of Winchester. And the last area that occurs on a more regular basis is in the Kemptville area, which is Leeds and Grenville. But the sum of the overall responses is still the fact that those rural response paramedic services respond to a greater number of occasions into the city than we respond to their community. This is part of the seamlessness. I continue to work with the province on looking at creative ways that we can continue to support each other. And yesterday I was speaking with the chief from Renfrew County, and they do respond regularly, and he was confirming that they do respond in our community on a regular basis. And that is, going back to my earlier comments, is one of the focus or that we have as a service to improve our operation, that we can provide a better service, particularly to West Carleton, just because it's one of the longest distance areas that we have difficulty serving when paramedic crews are stuck at the Civic or at the General Hospital. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my last question for you, Mr. Poirier, and it's just in touching on something that Councillor Luloff mentioned, because he had been asking about recruitment and challenges around that. What about retention? Could you speak to that? Like, are members of the Ottawa Paramedic Service, are they spending 20 years in the service? What's the the average length of a career? Are they sticking around? Are they happy? What's the retention like?
Through the chair, our retention rate is very high. I think we have less than a 3% turnover rate year in, year out. Recently, we've been seeing retirements, which is something new for the paramedic profession. And just yesterday, I was at Queen's Park recognizing 2 paramedics that received their 30-year pin in support of their exemplary service medal that they received 10 years earlier. So we are seeing an increase in the number of paramedics who are making a career within the service, and that's been very positive. But we still do have our challenges in terms of the physical and mental demands that being a paramedic is on the individual. And we continue to work on improving those. And that's goes back to the conversation with Councillor Luloff on our initiatives to improve better support our paramedics and their mental health. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. My final question and comment would be about the Ottawa Fire Service, which I greatly appreciate, and particularly our rural members. But I remember one moment early in the term when a bunch of new councillors headed to the training center for a half day of training, which was amazing. And I do remember one particular moment where we all kind of looked around at each other with this strange look on our face going, huh? Because we were told that the training center was they weren't going to be able to train there for much longer. And I apologize if there was an update, Chief Hutt, in your presentation on this, but could you speak to the committee on where we are at in seeking a new training facility for our wonderful Ottawa firefighters?
Chair, Councillor, thanks for that question. I enjoy this question. This is one of these legacy projects that I'm actually feeling very positive about. We are working closely with, so first of all, the use of the site and not use of the site. There are some limitations now. We still use the site, obviously interior, when we're not using or burning from a Class A perspective. We're not doing that on site. We have a temporary location on Barnesdale. So we have a facility there set up where we can do our burning. But the site is still used for a number of other training activities at that site. But we've really reached some progress working closely with financial services, looking at all our options from funding models moving forward. In the recent DC report, the 2024 DC report for the training center, it was identified as 25% DC funded. We recently provided arguments as to why it should be based on growth, and now we're seeing a 90% for development charge in that last report. So that's a significant change as well. And as recently as a couple of weeks ago, we're having very collaborative conversations with other city groups and departments and services about collaborating, about sharing facilities, sharing opportunities, and looking at various city properties. So we continue to work on this, but very optimistic. There's going to be light at the end of the tunnel at some time in the near future.
Right. And finally, no more questions. I just want to thank everyone, including Director Gooding. You're awesome to work with. You come out to West Carleton on Saturday to see demonstrations from other organizations. And I don't know if my office would function without bylaw on our relationship with Roger. So thank you for what you do. And yeah, that's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor King and then Hubley. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to also echo that. I'd like to thank emergency preparedness staff for its work on this budget and its recommended investments for new bylaw officers, firefighters, and paramedics, along with additional paramedic support staff. I'd definitely be remiss if I didn't join with my council colleagues and commend all of our first responders for their excellent service that they provide to our community on an ongoing daily 365 basis. It's very important. And at this point, I think I'd like to build on what Councillor Devine's questions were around the paramedic service addressing offloading challenges. Notwithstanding future reporting that will come back to committee about offloading, that sounds positive. I'm wondering if staff can describe how the 23 new paramedics and 4 new paramedic support staff will help both with reducing overtime and offloading concerns.
Thank you, Chair. The last inquiry was reducing overtime, and that absolutely is a priority for our service. Through the pandemic, paramedics and our staff were all hands on deck, committed to the objective of taking care of our community, and overtime was a daily event for many staff. It's good for the pocketbook, not necessarily good for the mental health or for the longevity of a career. So the additional staff will absolutely help with us and our commitment to reducing overtime on a service-wide basis. Through the pandemic years, it was a chronic issue for us. But bit by bit, we've been able to address that issue, and credit to committee and council on increasing our staffing so that we can provide the service on a regular time basis. So absolutely on that issue. And my apologies, I forgot your second inquiry, Councillor.
So it was overtime and as well offloading generally.
Yes. Thanks for that. Through the chair, specific to offload, this will absolutely help bolster our service. The additional staff will not have a direct impact on offload per se. We still have several initiatives where we help staff get off on time at the end of their shift by sending a paramedic so that they can double or triple up crews. And what I mean by that is that a single paramedic could take care of 2 or 3 patients on a stretcher. And that was an important initiative that we've done on an ad hoc basis. The new staff are not identified for those roles, but as offload delays continue to decrease, we'll have more staff to put on the road to provide that service to the community, which is really the intended purpose by the investment that's coming from committee and council. Thank you, Chair.
I appreciate that. And just a supplementary question there. I'm just wondering if we've calculated the overtime specifically for mental health calls or mental health offloading wait times, and will the FTE growth address that?
Through the chair, we have not calculated the time that we spend in offload related to mental health calls. We do have the data that I can get that information for you, Councillor. So I'll have that as a takeaway. That is an important piece for us to look at, and that is part of what links back to our initiatives, both in the market, but also on the mental wellbeing response team, where their transporting of patients is very low. It's 30%. Versus a regular paramedic crew that attends a call is around 70% at present. So this is an important initiative for our service because we absolutely recognize that for the most part, those individuals who require mental health services are not best served in the emergency department. They're best serviced by other community resources or services that may be available. Thank you.
I appreciate that answer. I appreciate the potential data that would come back to my office. And I also appreciate the work that's undertaken by our paramedic staff working specifically on offloading initiatives, including one at the Montfort Hospital in my ward. I know there's a lot of traction in terms of a pilot program that was launched in 2022. That really integrates primary care paramedics into the emergency department, working to reduce offload delays and increasing the availability of paramedic resources in the community. So I think it's important that we see continued work in that program. And I do know as well that the Montfort recently announced that it was opening a mental health emergency zone that would assist paramedics with direct care for people who might be in distress. So just looking forward for continued coordination with the hospitals, including the Montfort within the city in this to really address this problem. And of course, the work that will be undertaken with coordinating with the province to ensure that we really address the gap in resources that are required to address this challenge. I did have just one more unrelated question around the proposed senior advisor for Events Central to address the growing number of special events and film projects in the city. I'm just curious as to whether the one FTE is enough or whether we're anticipating a greater need as we see more events as well as film projects emerge in the city, as well as I'm thinking of the recent inquiry that Councillor Johnson received a response to around the bicentennial planning. So I'm just curious if you can speak to that senior advisor, as well as their role and the whether that FTE will be able to address the increased capacity of work that we'd be anticipating.
Mr. Chair, the FTE will certainly stabilize the team. As I said, this resource is on the team now as a temporary resource. So having it there as a permanent resource will assist in the planning and the coordination. At this point, our assessment is that this FTE will do the trick, but we will continue to monitor. We are seeing, as I said, a growing complexity and layering of events that is requiring more work by the senior advisors. These are often multi-party, multi-jurisdictional, sometimes even multi-location events. So this is something that EPS will continue tracking throughout 2025. Any future needs would be then brought forward through the budget process.
Thank you for that answer. Satisfies the question. And once again, I want to say thank you so much for all the work that you do on behalf of the city and its residents every day. It is obviously required and much appreciated. So thank you so much for all the good work that all of our first responders do for our city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor King, for your comments. Councillor Hubley, you're next.
Thank you, and I'll try to be as brief as possible with mine. Under the continuous improvement document with the budget for emergency and protective services, Ottawa Fire Services, it lists the repurposing of a 60-watt generator, and it says that the cost avoidance of $200,000. Can somebody provide some more detail on that, please?
Chair, through you. I'm sorry, I'm not referring to that. I don't have the document in front of me you're referring to. We did have generators slated for resiliency for our fire stations. And that was a total of 700K that was identified for generators for stations that do not have backup power.
And so with that included, Chief, does that mean that at some point in 2025, all stations will have backup power?
We have, so in the urban areas, we do have, I believe there's 3 stations that still remain without backup generation power. We have slated, and I'm just going to have a quick reference of the repurposing generator working for OPS. So I think the part of that narrative was it was just where we had a generator that we repurposed for one of our sites, and we've put that into commission. At the end of the day, what I can share with committee is we do have 700K identified to complete our urban stations to have that redundancy in the event that there is a power outage. Will that all be done in 2025? That may not all be done in 2025. But certainly in the next couple of years, we see that work being completed.
Okay, thank you, Chief. My next question will be for Mr. Chapman. The additional bylaw officers in the previous budget discussions, one of the things we had asked for as a pilot project was to have the officers working on poop and scoop enforcement as well as garbage dumping. Does that is that work going to be part of the effort of the new officers coming on board that you're talking about this year, or is that looked after with existing resources?
Mr. Chair, Councillor, thank you for the question. Specifically to the garbage dumping, we, as you may recall, we were provided with two additional temporary staff to offset what we think maybe or anticipate the increase in call volume related to dumping, you know, and more specifically in the commercial areas, but also in the rural areas and in the ditches on some of the side roads. So those two FTs are have now been deployed in that area. So we're responding to those complaints. We've seen a bit of an uptick in calls related to dumping, both in the commercial areas and in the rural areas. So that's but so far, you know, we're the two FTs are adequate to be able to respond to those complaints. As far as the stoop and scoop provisions of the animal care and control bylaw, we our generalists are the ones that respond to that. So we'll continue to do that. We're not seeing any you know, substantial increase in call volume specifically to that area.
Okay, yeah, they tend to come at different times of the year, springtime probably being the highest volume of those calls, I would expect, as people find little treasures left in the snowbanks. My understanding, and I'm looking for confirmation from you, additional officers assigned for that task basically pay for themselves. Is that correct? There's enough fines generated that they pay for themselves?
Mr. Chair, Councillor, just seeking some clarification. So you're asking specifically about the 10 FTs that are in the 2025 budget, or you're speaking specifically about the two additional FTs for the garbage provisions?
Yeah, sorry, Roger, I'll be more clear. With the poop and scoop enforcement that you have students, and you just mentioned that you have some of your generalists dealing with those infractions. Is the volume enough that it actually pays for the FTEs to do that? Is that how big this problem is getting?
Mr. Chair, Councillor, you know, that's a difficult question to answer, but what I can say is that animal licensing, the money that we collect through animal licensing is intended to recover some of the costs related to anything that we enforce related to animals, and that would include the stoop and scoop. So, you know, does animal licensing cover all the resources used to enforce the animal care and control bylaw? No, but certainly it does substantially help.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chapman. That's all my questions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hubley. Before I offer my final comments, does anyone else have any final questions? I do. I'll ask a few questions first and then I'll provide comments. So a number of my questions have been asked already. A number of the service fees that are associated with the Ottawa Fire Service are not going into effect until April 1st, when others go into effect January 1st. Can I just ask why that date is April?
I'm sorry, Chair, can you repeat that question?
In the budget, there's an outline of many service fees that we charge for various services governed by the Ottawa Fire Service. Their implementation date is April 1st, as opposed to what some might assume would be January 1st for many of the other charges. I'm just wanting to know why April 1st.
Chair, thank you for that question. That is a good question. I'm wondering if Cyril might have an answer for that.
Yeah, Chair, I don't have a direct answer other than a simple answer. Sometimes these are legacy times that we might have been used in the past, and that's what we kind of stick to on the annual anniversary date.
Fair enough. Okay. Fire alarm fees, we approved a bylaw earlier this year, and we'll see locations with multiple or back-to-back false fire alarms be charged fairly significant fees. I just want to better understand, are there any groups exempt from that, like schools or Ottawa Community Housing or any other institution, or will everyone be treated equally for subsequent false fire alarm calls?
Chair, thank you for that question. There are no exemptions under the way the fee structure or strategy has been set up. Everybody is treated equally. Keeping in mind with the dedicated resources, when we notice that there's a facility experiencing difficulty, we do have that opportunity where a fire prevention officer will go out, start having that dialogue and discussion with those to help. And we know there's fees associated with this strategy, but end of the day, we want to eliminate as many false alarms as we can.
Thank you for that. How do we market and sell ambulances and fire trucks once they've come to the end of life?
So sorry for that's the procurement of apparatus?
No, not procurement. When we are when the vehicle comes to the end of life, but still has use, how do we market and sell, recoup some funds from those vehicles?
So currently the standard practice is we work closely with Fleet Services, and Fleet Services has a disposal program that they do use. Quite often fire apparatus will go to an auction, and the proceeds from the auction will be reinvested into, the life cycling of future vehicles. There have been rare occasions where, there's Fire Services Without Borders. There's opportunities for us to look at that, but more frequently they're recycled, if you will, through the auctioneers to go back into life cycling.
Excellent, thank you. Just to Mr. Chapman, with respect to RATS, working group was reconstituted, I believe in late 2022, early 2023. The prevalence of rats and the reporting of rats in my ward is not going down. It's either maintaining or, depending on time of year. Can you just comment on the adequacy of resources to combat rats, and what does 2025 look like as far as strategy? I know bylaws is one component of the team that's looking at this on the working group, but any comments in particular from you would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, as you know, there is a working group related to the rat mitigation task force. Bylaw and Regulatory Services is not the lead on the task force, but certainly we're a stakeholder at the table, and we're actively involved in all discussions and any of the efforts to try and mitigate. From a bylaw perspective, what we think is very important is when we get complaints related to rats that are present in an area, the first thing we do is deploy staff to do inspections of properties around that area to ensure that we don't have open composts, improperly stored garbage, dilapidated structures, anything that may contribute to an increased population of rats in that area. We may even talk to residents about bird feeders, and if we see any where they're feeding squirrels and things like that on the ground. So we would address those issues. So we do have information pamphlets that we deliver to residents around those areas where we're getting the complaints. So we try to be as proactive as possible through education, and where needed, we'll address any violations to property maintenance or property standards bylaw.
Thank you for that. Just finally, my final question is just a request. Councillor Bradley had asked about the accessible fund, the contributions that are recouped from the private transportation vehicle rate that's charged the customer. Can we, by the end of next week, just get a quick one-page memo about funds in this fund, the main areas of where these funds are currently directed to, and whether there are future opportunities for the committee or council to talk about identifying any other areas to put the funds in? So what's our balance? How do we spend those monies now, and future opportunities? Would that be possible by the end of next week?
Chair, Yeah, we could provide a one-page memo to specifically identify where those funds are being spent. I can tell you that the Rockstar Finance staff are listening online and heard the question, so they were sending me Teams messages here with the numbers. So I can tell you that we have about $4.1 million currently in that account, and $2.1 million of that is slated to be expenditures going out of that for 2024. So you're in about a $2 million remaining in that account for the start of 2025. Keeping in mind that the incentive package that we're offering through the accessible taxi program will eat up a lot of those costs over the next couple of years.
Fair enough. Thank you for that, and the staff who were able to pull those numbers. My final comment this morning is the following. This is a good news budget. This is a good news budget for the emergency and protective services that we offer our citizens, and it responds to a number of matters that we have been clear about throughout the year. And to staff, I want to say thank you for listening. You've heard this morning a genuine appreciation from my colleagues of the work that you and your employees do in your respective departments or divisions. So thank you. It was literally a 365-day, 24/7 job that employees do within this department, and we're very much appreciative of that. So it was basically unanimous feeling and sentiment from my colleagues today, and we are very appreciative of the work that you do. So thank you. Okay, the roadmap motion is before us. We had a declaration by, who wants to speak? The treasurer, go ahead, yes?
Here, just quickly, because I don't like leaving questions unanswered or firm responses. So as I look down through the fire training, the cost for the fees and the user fees, these are all training type user fees. So my strong confidence and suspicion is we use April 1st because by the time some of these registrations will have occurred before the budget is adopted. If you remember, or for those that are on the RCFS CSSD committee, typically what we do in Parks and Recreation is as part of our directions report, we ask for pre-authority to enact the user fees for Parks and Recreations on January 1st. At the end of the day, it's calendarized revenue. It's not a big number for training from a fire perspective, 40K. So, that's why April 1st is a little bit different than the January 1st in those scenarios.
Thank you. I appreciate you acquiring that information as well. Okay, so the roadmap motion has been read by the vice chair at the beginning. Maybe that can just be put up on the screen to make sure committee members see that again. The declaration by Councillor Luloff pertains to item 3B the communications part. So what I would suggest is, Councillor Luloff, if you would like to perhaps turn your camera off, we will vote on this matter first, and then I will welcome you back on the main item. So I cannot see Councillor Luloff. I just want to make sure. He's gone. Okay. So colleagues, on the matter of 3BI, is that carried?
Carried.
Okay. So we'll welcome Councillor Luloff back. There he is. And on the remaining section of the entire budget, is that carried?
Carried.
Thank you, colleagues. Item 5 is status update for the period ending 12th November 2024. Is this item received?
Could I hold that? I just had a quick question on that if I can.
Yep, go ahead right now.
Thank you very much. This pertains to bylaw. With the new three garbage bins policy coming in place, I'm receiving more and more complaints from residents on illegal dumping. Could Director Chapman speak to when we could expect to receive an update on that inquiry?
I think that is an inquiry that you wish to make?
No, I already submitted one.
Sorry?
I already submitted one.
Okay, this is just a follow-up to this item.
Yeah.
Okay, so noted.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, so we're preparing the response to your inquiry, collecting the data, but we anticipate bringing that for February's committee.
February?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that question. So is this item now received? Received, thank you. Item 6, I'm not aware of any in-camera items. Thank you. Item 7, anyone with notices of motion? Seeing none. Any inquiries? Seeing none, and I don't believe there's any other business. Our next meeting will be February the 20th, 2025. Wishing you all very safe and holiday season. Encourage you to attend some of the seasonal events being coordinated through Event Central and the Special Events Advisory Team, including the many Santa Claus parades across our city or holiday markets. My very best to everyone over the holiday season. And again, we are adjourned and back in February.